Hello, everybody. I'm here today. I'm Marcela Allemand with Hispanic Notes, and I am here with the great Don Octavio Solis, who has granted us the opportunity to interview him and just get to know him a little bit and about his work. And just to introduce you guys to Mr. Solis, he's an award-winning author of over 20 plays. Is considered by many to be one of the most prominent Latino playwrights in America. Wow. With works that both draw on it and transcend the Mexican American experience, he's a writer, a director whose styles defines formula, examining the darkness, magic, and humor of humanity with brutal honesty and intensity. His imaginative and ever-evolving work continues to cross cultural and aesthetics boundaries, solidifying him as one of the great playwrights of our times. Born in El Paso, Texas, to Mexican-American parents, Mr. Solis started his career in theater by joining his high school, Riverside High School's El Paso, Texas theater group when he was only 14 years old. Wow. He received a BFA at Trinity University and went on to earn his MFA at Trinity University off-campus program at Dallas Theater Center. Octavio uses his experience in life to help create and shape his plays, often drawing directly from his time in El Paso. Mr. Solis was a cultural consultant for the Disney film Coco. He voices an arrival agent in the film and its spin-off short. Amazing movie, by the way, if you haven't seen it. Some of his contributions to the Latino theater has been a large number of in the community of works that has created and designed to be for and be played by Latinos or Latinas. One of his most critically acclaimed work, Lidia, focuses on a Latino family and their maid who recently came from Mexico to work in the States. Just like so many stories that we hear. His importance in the Latino and Latina community have been widely recognized as evident by his numerous awards, such as his National Latino Playwriting Award and his being awarded the Henry Award for Outstanding New Play. He has also received a number of grants and funds, including the New Works Fund grant for the Theater Bay Area and the Kennedy Center Fund for New American Plays. The River Plays, his anthology of plays about the U.S.-Mexico border, is published by No Passport Publishing, and his new book, my favorite ever, Retablos, Stories from a Life Lived Along the Border, published by City Lights, is also available for purchase, and we will share the links at the end. I cannot tell you again, and I already told you a million times, how happy I am to have you here with us today. And we go ahead and get started because I think we all want to get to know you, Octavio. We want to know your work, amazing, but also get to know the person. So like all rookie writers, we want to know, when did you start writing?
Well, first of all, Marcela, I want to thank you for that lovely introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here with you, and I hope I provide everything you need for this blog. But I wanted to say that what started me writing was just reading in elementary school, reading in high school. We had teachers in these little schools along the river in El Paso that were really remarkable in the kind of material they had us read. Of course, none of it was Latino based or Mexican work or written by Chicano writers or anything like that, because it was the 60s, and that wouldn't have entered into their minds at all at that time, although it should have, but it didn't. The culture was still growing. We were still sort of trying to identify ourselves, figuring out who we were as a culture, as a demographic group. But they had us reading everything from Edgar Allan Poe to Emily Dickinson. I fell in love with those writers and with poetry in general at a very, very young age. I would say maybe when I was 12, and maybe even earlier than that, maybe when I was in 5th grade. When we started reading those works, I didn't really fully understand them, but I knew that there was a magic in those texts, in the stories of Edgar Allan Poe, and the rich poetry of Shakespeare. We would read sonnets, and I couldn't unravel them, but they were I knew that if I found the key, I would find riches. So I really focused a lot on that. And in high school, I was very shy at the time, until my sophomore year in high school, when I found theater, and I was kicking and screaming dragged into the drama club, and then I learned about Shakespeare and Moliere, and my learning just exploded exponentially. My immersion in classic literature of the stage, Ibsen and Tennessee Williams, and still I was studying intensely all in my English classes. We were reading everything, short stories like The Monkey's Paw, of course, Shirley Jackson, Morpo, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Herman Melville's stories and short novellas, and then The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which really just sort of changed me. And I thought that someday I'd like to write something like that. But essentially, I kind of just put it on the side because I was swallowed up by theater. I got stage bit, and I said, I'm going to be an actor. That's what I'm going to be in my life. That was my aim after my sophomore year in high school. And for 7 years after graduation, that's all I pursued actively. But my initial interest was in poetry. My first 2 poems, which my mother kept in a little file cabinet, little folder, were like something called Ode to My Mother, and another one called Ode to a Prairie Dog. Embarrassing little poems, but very heartwarming for her to have written these. One of them for her, and the other one to an animal I had never even seen in the desert. But I understood that they were supposed to be around El Paso, and but I decided to write a poem to a prairie dog. And I didn't know that I would become a writer until a real writer, that would be my calling, until much later. I just sort of kept it as a hobby. I just didn't think it was possible to be a writer.
I think we all think that, especially talking to a lot of our writers at the magazine. I think we all have the same, like, who's gonna want to read my stuff, right? And look at you now. We all want to read your stuff. So I guess it's a way that we just have to be brave and just go out and say, you know what, I like what I'm writing, and hope that the world feels the same passion that I am putting on my paper.
Yeah, and at the time I said, what? I don't have any stories. What stories do I want to have? So I could scan through the newspaper to find stories that would be interesting, that I thought maybe people will want to hear about this. But in the end, I just couldn't get into that. I wrote a lot of poetry because I felt like I could express myself. I knew I was knowing myself. I thought I knew myself, of course, but we don't really know. But that was the world I knew, was my internal life. And I thought I could write about that, and I can do that as poems. But I never thought that I could write plays or stories about events in my life. I never thought that was possible. And I got published. I got published in the local high school literary magazine. I got a poem published in a magazine at the university. But it just became a hobby rather than a vocation. My vocation, I was so convinced, was going to be acting. I loved film. I loved movies. And I thought, and I loved the stage. I just really loved the idea of performing before a live audience, new work, daring work, work that would just make them gasp or laugh and or cry. It just was, that seemed so exciting. You can do that in a movie theater, but as an actor, you never know that until you go see the movie. You just and there can be only 2 people there, and they can go to the bathroom or buy popcorn and come back and see the movie, and the movie will go on. Whereas in the theater, we feed on the energies of the audience. We feed on their nervousness or on the energies they put out. Like maybe they had a lot of, too much chile after dinner to come see the play, and they're like, oh, we feel that energy and we respond off of it. We respond to the guy who's snoring in the corner there. We respond to the child that's really engaged and laughing, and those energies come back to them from our performance. So that live experience is very rich and powerful, and I just was sucked into that. That's all I wanted to do.
So it's just, yeah, it's, you can fight, what you were born to do. I think I really believe
Yeah,
that
yeah,
you
yeah.
can run and hide, but sooner or later, I think that you're going to be faced with, who you are. So what is your writing process? Any day, do you write every day? Do you have to be inspired? Do you have to listen to music? How does Octavio Solis write in a regular day?
I'm when I'm beginning a project, I just sort of keep it in the back of my brain, and open the windows so that other ideas can fly in and ideas can fly out that I'm giving up on. But I find it difficult to just start writing right off the bat. I have to get an image of almost like a postcard image of a scene from the story or the play.
Mhm.
I work on that, on specific imagery, and and I'll see the picture, but I won't understand it. But the more clear I see the picture, the more I feel like, okay, I'm ready to dive in now. So it may take me a while. It may take me weeks before I finally do sit down. Once I do sit down, I start writing, and then I just let the pen guide me. I let the characters guide me into in right into the next page, and the
Mhm.
page after that, and the page after that. I don't work according to an outline. I never know what's going to happen in the next moment, because I want that experience to be fresh, and I don't want to dictate what the play should be. It has to be what it will be,
Mhm.
and I'll just sort of follow it. But I'll work toward that photograph, that postcard image. I'll
Mhm.
work toward it, or I'll start from it as a launching pad, and work toward the next image, and then the next image. So I'll connect them that way. So it works in a way. My plays work in a way that are sometimes non-narrative. They'll move around in time, and they'll move into a liminal space also that is neither realistic, the real world, and the narrative of sequential time, a narrative in that way, and is also not specifically like, up in heaven or anything like that, but somewhere in that middle space
Mhm.
where we can allow ghosts, or we
Yeah.
can allow special events to happen, a special voice to take over, and I look for those liminal spaces very much in my writing. And then I keep working until without editing, without censoring myself,
Mhm.
until I get to the end. And it's only like in the last 10 pages that I'll go, oh, I think I know where this is going. I think I know where this is going. But even then, I leave myself open for surprises. But generally, it's like now the roller coaster's coming down, and I can see, the gate. So I know, oh, I know where this is going to, and it's a beautiful gate, and it's a beautiful climax. But I'm going, I just need to follow the characters. They know the play, they know the story better than I do, and
Right.
so I trust them. I trust them implicitly with that, and it's
And
hard.
it is, but I think that you just said something, no outline. Thank you. And the fact that you are letting the characters take you and guide you. And that's how amazing stories I feel like are, that people can read them and say, wow, I actually believe that actually can happen to me, because not censoring yourself and not worrying about who's going to be reading and who's going to be like, well, I don't like what Octavio. It's just, you know how it is. Like, your
Yeah,
tia, your somebody
yeah.
in your family is always not going to like that.
We
And I
have
think the
our
fact that you
we
open is amazing.
Yes, we have our editors. We all have our editors. Mine was my mother. What is my mom gonna think? What is my dad gonna think?
Exactly.
What is my high school English teacher gonna think?
Right.
What is Shakespeare gonna think? I mean, I imagine all my great writers that I admire right on my shoulder, looking over my shoulder and reading while I'm writing, saying, "Oh, I don't know. That's not good writing. Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know." And I just, at some point, I have to dispel them. I have to tell them
Right.
to get out of my room, because the
Right.
only people that I need to be with are the characters.
Right.
Um, even the ones that my mentors, they can't be in that room right then, because they will always try to guide me to quote unquote my better writing, and that's another thing that I've given up in my process is, don't be afraid to be bad. I decided
Right.
not to be afraid to be bad, to just write and tell the story, let the play unfold itself, and not judge it, and don't try to be excellent, don't try to be great, just write, and you'll surprise yourself then.
That's right. Yeah.
Not only that, but that's only draft one. you know there's going to
Yes,
be
really.
10 by the time I'm done with the play. Usually it's about 10 drafts later, and the rehearsal draft that we work on while we're in rehearsal before the premiere, and even after that I still am rewriting. So I can't afford to try to be great right on the first draft. There will be some amazing writing that'll surprise even me, amazing because it's fresh and it's alive on the page
Hmm.
rather than dead. And but there'll be a lot of it that I'll go, well, that's I have to rewrite that sentence. But that's what, the second phase of this is about. Then you bring the editor in. Then you kind of look at the work and go, okay, that's a bad sentence. Let me find a more interesting way to sort of express that. Or how would I interview the character. I say, how would you really want to say that? What is it you really are saying? And they'll tell me. And I'll go, okay, then I'll write it in. You know what I mean? I think of them not as constructions or as a suit of clothes that an actor is going to
Right.
wear. I think of them as real people with real feelings, real stakes in the story, and real needs, or else they wouldn't be bugging me in my sleep to write them.
That's
Um,
amazing.
they
So
nag me in my sleep.
it's like those thoughts that never leave you. So those thoughts are your inspiration. I mean, I know that for your book, you drew inspiration out of your life,
Yeah.
but first of all, how do you remember all those stories? Because I mean, you
Well,
went way back. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
you know,
With retablos, it was interesting because the way they came about is I was working on a play, and I've been working on it for a while, and I worked at night, and usually, kiss my daughter goodnight, and I go and write on this play. And then at about 1 o'clock or two, I'd be like really tired and say, that's enough. But something would be nagging me all the time. This one little retablo kept nagging me, this image, this postcard image. And I said, uh, well, let me write that down, but it's not a play. What is this? I don't know. And I said, just write it down. And I wrote it down like a story, and then I dated it, and I created a file for it, and I put it in there. And and then and then I would come back to it the next night after working on my plays. After using that part of my brain for my plays, I
mhm,
would come back to this and say, this is my special thing. This is only for me, just for my satisfaction. I come back at it, look at it, and either I would take a little idea of a paragraph and kind of make it longer, or sometimes if it were like 5 pages, I would make it shorter. I would see how short can it go, how
right.
brief, because I thought of them as based on a single image, um, and um, and then I titled them. So usually after that single image, but they came to me late at night. One, it started with one, and when you remember one thing,
Mhm.
automatically in that room of that memory, you see a door to another memory. And so you open that door, and then there is another room, and you visit that memory. And then you see that there are two doors in that memory, and you could pick one or the other or both, but let's pick that one, for instance. And then that takes me into my third story. And then if I get stuck and there's no doors or windows in that one, then I go back to the earlier memory and I go, what was it about that? Oh yeah, this door. And so I'd revisit that memory, and then I would write. So they were all kind of interconnected. Each memory was a gateway to the next one. And that's how I worked. And I just accumulated them quietly over a period of time. I think I had like 14, 15, until a friend of mine who's an editor at Ziziva, a literary journal out of San Francisco, called me and said, I really would love to have some Latino material, but I can't get anything from my colleagues that I know, poets, writers, and I really would love to have you have my culture represented there. Do you have anything from a play, an excerpt you can share with us? And I said, well, I don't have anything that I feel really ready to share, but I have these little stories. Would you like to see them? And he said, sure, send them. So I sent them to him, and he says, I'm picking 6 of these, and and we'll publish them. Can you write an introduction, and can you write like something at the end, like a big, like an epilogue, an intro, and an epilogue? I said, sure. But instead of writing it like an introduction to these stories, I wrote it as a retablo, as another retablo, and that one was called Retablos, because then I started going to that image of these tin. I gesture this way because I have some on my wall. I collect a few of them.
Yes,
And
I heard
really,
that. Well, I saw it in an interview, and now
beautiful.
you got me looking for retablos because
they're wonderful. They're really
they are
special.
wonderful. They're beautiful. I saw them for the first time when I went to San Miguel de Allende, the most beautiful place. I mean, it's a beautiful place. And I went to El Mercado, and I never seen them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are those? And it's funny because in your interview that you gave recently, you talked about, you show your collection. So I got to see a little pieces about the man that Gaston by the Bee. And you said that it was little pieces of flash fiction. And I never thought about it like that, but you're right.
Yeah, they tell a very succinct story using images, and also on various levels. They exist on various levels, on a very mundane level, earthly level, where someone has an injury, an illness, or a loss, or a threat. And then it exists on this metaphysical level, where there's the appearance of a saint, or the Virgen de Guadalupe, but usually some santo appears, and he's got the robes on and a crown, and he looks like a little moth that is planted right on the screen. And it's just beautiful. It's beautiful. And it has a beginning, middle, and end, very succinct and very simple. And I think of them as kind of like postcards to God, postcards to the divine. But they work on all those levels. And I found that I wanted to model these stories after that. Or I discovered that I was doing it after the fact. And that was my closest metaphor for it. And then after that, they were published as like a selection of images with the title Retablos. He took all the other titles away for the purposes of the magazine, of the journal. And then he asked me to read them at when the issue came out, to inaugurate the issue. He asked me and a couple of writers to read at the poetry room of City Lights bookstore. And I was like, oh, holy cow. I have arrived. Now I'm about to move out of El Paso after 25 years. And in the last 2 months, I'm about to go read at the poetry room, which I visited often and I considered sacred. It's where Allen Ginsberg read, and Waldman, Jack Kerouac, so many great, and of course, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, who owns the bookstore, or owned it. He has since passed away. At I think 100 years of age, but he cultivated this room that was for poetry, and especially the beat poets, but all poetry. And I was just very moved to be in there and reading these stories. And someone who Peter Maraveles, who is the events coordinator for City Lights, came up to me afterwards and he said, these are publishable. You have more? I went, yeah, I have a few more, but I can write a lot more. I sort of see them as a book connected with these images, with these almost tintypes, these retablos, maybe one painted for each of the stories. And he said, I'm going to connect you with our editor here. And he did. And she called me right away. And she said, I read these that you have. They're fantastic. Write me more. And there's no pressure. When you're ready to turn them in, give them to us and we'll work on this. And she was an amazing editor, saved me from my worst writing, and worked very closely with me on them. And then she published them. I stopped at 50. And and I don't know why. I just thought 50 is a good number, and I thought it was going to be a really thick book, and it was actually thin. But I think they're so packed with
Yeah.
so much information and so much imagery
Yes.
that you can read one and feel like, okay, let that sink in, and you have to take a time. It's almost like there are 50 poems instead of 50 stories. Um, and in a slim volume like that, I thought that was still a lot. I've written a few more since then, and I've gotten them published in a separate collection called it's put out by Wild Sam, and it's like a field journal, something to take on the road, and they put out various volumes. This one happens to be called Texas, and I wrote 3 of them for
Texas.
yeah. I wrote them for Wild Sam. I might read one from this later on if there's an
I mean,
opportunity.
I'm so glad. It's like a perfectly curated memoir,
Yeah,
Retablos. It's
yeah,
but you're right. I felt like every story was so impactful. Every
yeah,
story has such a significance in your life that would take us to understand a little bit more about yourself, I guess.
yeah, yeah. And as a flawed man, as a skinny brown kid,
Kitty Brown, yeah.
uh, I uh, I I thought of each of them as a kind of rite of passage.
Yes.
Each of them had to be an event that either led me to understand something about myself
Mhm.
or something about the world. Usually both, and that would change me. That would be a step, a rite of passage into adulthood. Most of them happened before I was an adult, and some of them happened when I was an adult.
Mhm.
But they were generally about like my life in El Paso. So most of them are when I'm a kid, or in high school. They were, and I still think that there are more back there, but just need to sort of start writing them again.
Please do. We want to hear more. Um, so I know we talked about our worst censorship, which is, our parents. And I hope I agree with you completely on that. But what was your family's reaction to Retablos?
Well, I wrote it out of love. I wrote it out of love for my family, for my brothers and my sisters, and out of love for myself, which I hadn't really ever offered that. That has never really, I never consciously offered that to myself. So it was out of love for that skinny brown kid,
Mhm.
but especially for my family, because they were. I understand their struggles. It was a way, the writing, each story led me to understand their personal struggles in trying to raise 4 kids under extremely difficult
Yeah,
circumstances in a town that was often ungrateful.
yeah.
Um, and and so I was very nervous about how they would take it. And
Mhm.
I never shared the material with them, but I said I was writing something. And then when I was done, I sent it to them. I sent them the manuscript, and said, "This is going to get published. You should read it." And I don't know how far they got in the reading, but they never talked about it with me. They never shared it. I shared it with my sister, who read it, and she said, "Hijo mano, you really put our dirty laundry out there." But
I
but
know. That's
but
yeah.
but she said thank you. She said thank you for that. You're sharing some really good stories, and now I have some of my own that I feel like you need to know about, so you can write about them. And I went,
Don't
wow.
you love that?
And I thought, no, you should write them, Rosina.
Yes,
Oh,
exactly. Don't you love that?
she
You
should
need to
write
write
them.
about your tia, such and
Yeah.
such. I'm like, well, it doesn't work like that.
No,
But I think
yeah.
I think you wrote some beautiful things, especially about your sister and the way you saw that maternal. Uh, you had that maternal view from your sister, even though she was your younger sister.
She was
I
the
feel
younger
very
sister.
touched
Yeah.
when you read that about her. When you wrote that about her, I thought it was
Yeah.
beautiful, and obviously your grandmother, who
Oh, it was
I
very special.
mean,
She was very special. She was a she
I
was
could we could
just
I could read that. I mean, absolutely.
yeah.
And I love it when she took you to, was it President Kennedy? Is that when
Yeah, she took me to see Kennedy. She thought it was
yes,
important that I see him, that I meet him, or just
yes.
see him. She raised me high, and and I was scared. I didn't know what was going on. I was
Yeah.
little. Wasn't even, I was maybe 5, and I didn't understand what all the, I thought I was in the middle of a riot. And it's only later that I really understood what it was about,
Yeah.
what it all built to. And so I have the privilege of being able to say, I saw President John F.
Yes, you
Kennedy.
did.
No, it's really
I think our
interesting.
abuelas always, at their own in their own way. I feel like they want to give us those opportunities or show us those, to teach us those lessons, and
Yes.
I know I just thought that was very remarkable. So going back to your family, and I mean, your mom didn't
Oh
say
yeah.
anything, but I
Well,
mean,
I they never spoke about it, and then when I was going to go to El Paso, Bill Clark, who's a proprietor of a great bookstore called Literarity in El Paso, he asked me, "Would you read from it? I've ordered your book. I've ordered 50, actually like 100 copies of your book. I
oh
know I'm
wow,
going to sell them all. Please come, please read." And I said, "Okay." So we organized a reading. He sold them all. He sold all the books
of
while I was
course,
there. And there were a lot of people from my high school that showed up that people I haven't seen in like 40 years. It was a long time since I'd seen them. And um, my parents came, and
hmm
uh, and Bill set them up with 2 seats right at the front. And I was embarrassed. And I said, well, I can't read some of them or else they'll, but they were, in the end, they sat there and they listened to them, and they were at the end quite moved and quite proud,
of course, yeah,
especially as, old colleagues of high school colleagues of mine went and approached them and said, "Mrs. Solis, good to see you again," because my parents always visited the high school, especially my mom,
hmm
where she was mistaken for a student often because she looked so young. She was very young. And so we went out to dinner afterwards, and they didn't talk about it at all, but I knew that they heard the stories. I think my probably my father more than my mother really understood
hmm
at the heart how the stories were like a reflection of how they reflected on him.
hmm
So he was, I think he got it, but he didn't want to talk about it.
right, yeah,
He's just not going to raise the issue. But he's not going to chide me about it.
right,
Um, and I could have written some other retablos that would have been savage, that would have really been
hmm
savage about our upbringing. I masked them, I hid them in a way
yeah,
so they would not sort of, because I just found it difficult.
yes,
Even though I was thinking at the same time that if they read them and disowned me, it was like, well, I'm 55, 58, whatever. I'm not a kid anymore. So I guess, I get
right,
what I deserve. But none of that happened. Um, I don't know the level of understanding my mother had, because she was already under the throes of early onset Alzheimer's. And so I don't know how much she understood. I don't know that she ever read them. I don't know that she could read a story all the way through without losing the thread. And now she certainly can't. She's in that place. My father can. He still does know. And I know that he reads, because I was surprised to learn that he had some great literature in translation into Spanish on his bookshelf that I had never known about. Great authors like John Steinbeck and other writers from Spain and some from Mexico. But I had never known that side of him, because he's a young man who never even went through much of high school. I think he did get
right,
through high school in Mexico, but that was it. That's his education. Um, but that my relationship with them has still held. They still know I love them. They understand that I wrote these out of love, especially my father. It's my brother who the relationship has never really been healed, and the publication of these stories has really created a rift between us even more than there was before. And that's too bad, because I did my best to depict them honestly, and really I kind of blame myself for the misunderstanding that we had in that one particular story, Bad Blood.
hmm
But But what he objected to was how I depicted my parents. He just thought I was being very unfair and depicting them like crude, ignorant rancheros, and
No, I didn't
things
get
like
that
that.
from at all. I
No,
thought you were, that's a reality of a lot of our parents, I
yeah,
think that
yeah,
it's everybody's reality. And that's what I think is so good about the stories, and incredibly brave, because we preach, we go to those, to the workshops, you have to just write like nobody, like don't worry about anybody, don't worry about what anybody says. But really, you just nailed it. It is near impossible for Latino, at least for me, or it
mhm,
sounds like it is for you and a lot of people that I know, to completely just free yourself of that, because like you said, you had to mask things because you just don't want to get the real story, establish your point of view on the situation. It's incredibly difficult. And I'm glad that you pointed that out for us
yeah,
out there,
yeah.
writers
But
that try to
but
go
it
through
will
that.
but it will come out, and it's come out in my
Yes.
plays. It's come out in my plays, and the depictions are savage. And my father has seen those plays, some of them, and he always says, he told me once, I didn't like that character. That man was awful. He was terrible. And he didn't realize that I had based a lot of that man's actions on my father's. And
Mhm.
so it was good because he didn't
Right.
recognize himself. And
Mhm.
people wouldn't automatically assume that this was my father.
Right.
It was just a father. Um, and I've been punishing fathers in my place for a long time.
El
Um,
mero mero.
El
Yes.
mero mero.
El
But
mero
also,
mero.
I've been tracking my daughter's relationship with me in those plays as well. In a lot of these plays, the hero or the heroine is a little girl, or a young teen who's growing up and trying to deal with the her relationships, not only to Texas and the world but also to her family.
Mhm.
And those are they're like warriors, these women, these young ladies.
Yes.
And it's only
Mhm.
in the last couple of years that I realized that I've been unconsciously tracking my daughter's growth and
Mhm.
my relationship to her, my fears for her, and my concerns about, like, am I going to be a good father to her?
Yes.
Am I going to be uh, like my dad,
Right.
who, in spite of everything, I still think of as a terrific father.
Right. Absolutely.
And he's still that. He's still a tremendous model for me.
Yeah, those are just generational things, and I see that a lot. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I see a lot in the families of our families, the people that we know, the Latino families.
Oh yeah.
Um, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's their culture that we're just passionate. I don't know, but I also know no non-passionate Latinos, so I shouldn't generalize like that. But I feel
Yeah.
like listen to our music, listen, look at like the novelas. I mean, you don't see
I
that in
know.
as the world turns. But it's funny because one of my questions to you is you as the brown skinny kid growing up in El Paso, um, how do you align that, like you said, to your own daughter? Now that you have your daughter, how does that align that story of your
Oh.
life? And you mentioned it now, that how do you compare
Um,
it?
it's it it causes me to sort of look realistically at how generations are. Each generation is different than the last,
Mhm.
and probably more American. Um, I s- I speak really good English because I
Right.
decided to master it at some time, because I was not mocked necessarily, but made to feel not quite as uh, uh, integrated, because I fumbled over a language because it was acquired. It was new to me, English. And in my head, I said, I'm going to be better at writing English and speaking it than
Mhm.
any of my teachers. Wait and see. I'm going to do that. But but I still knew some Spanish. I still knew it because I had my parents who spoke mainly Spanish,
Mhm.
even though they learned English, both of them. Um, their ground basic language was Spanish. So I had that, but English sort of started colonizing my consciousness so much
Mhm.
that I lost a lot of my Spanish. And then by the time I had my daughter, she lost it all because I didn't speak Spanish inside the home. And when I did try to speak to her in Spanish as a child, she thought it was gibberish. She thought I was making up a new language, and she'd talk gibberish back to me, and I was going like, ay, 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 esta niña, ¿cómo la voy a, cómo voy a enseñarle cómo hablar en español? So it became very, very difficult because we spoke English. My wife happens to be white, and so my daughter spans both cultures. And now she blames me for not teaching her more English. She's comfortable, speaking only English, more Spanish, I mean, and she's comfortable speaking more English because, she's in an environment where she's not in touch with a lot of Latinas. But when she goes to El Paso, she really wishes, whenever we visit my parents, she really wishes she was bilingual. She thought that would have been just a real asset. So she regrets it. So she's kind of like the next generation after mine that knows even less Spanish, and then her children will know even less than that, unless it becomes a concerted effort, unless they move to a community where there is a lot of Spanish. Just out here where we live in Oregon, there's just not. There is a community here,
Really?
a very thriving community that came because of the orchard work and the vineyards, and have now, several generations later, they're now doing everything, working in banks, they're baristas, they're everywhere. But their children, they feel like me in El Paso, like they're still holding on to Spanish, but more and more they're starting to lose it. They're starting to get more Americanized because it's just going to happen. A lot of my colleagues who work as playwrights that are Latino also find that they are writing only in English. They can't write in Spanish. I've never written a work in Spanish, and I feel like that's my next big task. I have to write a work completely in Spanish, in the vernacular of the worker, of the ones who are out there working, to write a play for that community and not for the middle class or upper class Latino or white community, but for them, for the people that don't get to go to the theater, to write a play that they'll relate to and go, ese hombre es, yo soy ese hombre, that's me. And that's going to be difficult because I have to sort of immerse myself in the culture again in a way that I haven't in a while. Living out here in the country, I find that I'm exposed to it a lot more. And that's what is giving me this idea that, man, I really need to do that. I really need to immerse myself in that culture again so I can write something that is for them, a gift for them. So
I think you are totally going to be able to do it because your Spanish you have perfect Spanish.
no,
So
I wish I did.
I mean, I've heard you say, I don't know. It seems like you do. Especially if you're not trying to be fancy with the words. I think
right.
Yeah, going to be great.
Yeah. I'll watch some programming in Spanish, like the noticias, and I'll sit there and I'll follow it, and I will pick out a word and go, that's how you say that word. Yeah. I always struggle to find that word I know that word in English real well, but I don't know what it translates to, and they will say it like crime. I never knew. It's not crimen. It doesn't sound right. And then they say delitos. They say delitos. And I went, boom, that's the word. Those delitos. Okay, so I have to remember that word for the future, for when I have to do a Spanish language radio interview, which I'm always terrified about.
Just
practice. I freeze up and all my Spanish just drops to my feet and I can't find it.
I would have never thought that. I'm shocked. I'm serious. I'm shocked.
True.
I would have never.
It's true. Well, I've also been dealing with a lot of things mentally since the pandemic. I've dealt with a lot of brain fog and with a lot of issues around that. And so I feel like my memory's been affected a little bit. And but I don't know, maybe I'm just getting old. But it's made me very nervous. A lot of things happened during this pandemic that just
Yeah,
sabotaged me.
and that was one of the questions that I have for you, because as a writer, I think a lot of people reported different things. How did that affect you? I mean, I
Oh,
heard that you were
enormous.
totally, you were not even leaving the house, and you were sending your wife for groceries. In one of your interviews, you said that.
Yes,
So
yeah, she's the one that told me you got to stay home, because I always catch everyone else's cold. I always catch I don't get the flu anymore because I get a flu shot every year, but I still would get everyone's cold 3, 4 times, or a cough, or a, some stomach ailment, because I'm a chronic nail biter. I'm always chewing my nails, and so I'm touching things and then putting my fingers in my mouth. So that always gets me sick. So she says, "You're not leaving. You're not leaving. You're not coming. I'm going to the grocery store, to Freddie Meyer or whatever, to do the shopping, or Costco, and but you stay home." So she would go out with her mask, and we were doing really well for a while. And then I got sick in late 2020 in December, when I decided to go out and do some Christmas shopping, and went into a shop that was very crowded and had poor ventilation. And even with a mask, I got it.
yeah,
Even with a mask, I got sick, and I was very, very ill.
really.
Um, but I was already kind of off my game way before that.
Hmm.
Uh, I had uh, I had worked on 3 plays at once, uh, that happened very quickly in January, February, and a little bit of March. And I was flying back and forth. I think I was on a plane 8 times
Wow.
during that period, 8 separate times, from from here to San Francisco, working there, and then working at the Arena Stage in Washington, D.C., which is one of the places that became a hotspot, and then going to Houston, another hotspot for the pandemic.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, they weren't hotspots then, they were just starting in March of 2020.
Right.
And the world was still open in that time of January, February, March, until like March 10th. And so I had finished those projects. They all closed well before the pandemic. Only one of them lost, like, I think 4 final performances. Um, and but I was extremely tired from that trip. I had also gotten
Mhm.
sick. I got a bad cold. And so when they shut things down, I kind of breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Oh God, good, that's good, because
Yeah.
I need a rest. I need a
Right.
real break." And so I said, "I'll just give myself a month's break, and then we'll open the world up again." Well, a month became 2 months,
Yeah.
and I didn't write. I slept a lot. I watched a lot of TV. I read a lot, but I didn't do anything else. And then I heard that we were going to be shut down for a while. Theater
Right.
companies were closing everywhere. All of them
Right.
closed.
Hmm.
All of them suspended their shows and their seasons for the next year, even. And I had some gigs that were going to happen, and they didn't. So I lost a lot of work. And then I heard that on the news, they were saying it'll be 5 years before we get a vaccine. Maybe. And at that point, I said, theaters are going to be closed for 5 years. I'm done. I'm done as a playwright. I might as well retire. And something in me just gave up. Something in me just collapsed and caved in. And I just said, what's the point? And I had these assignments, and they tried to push me toward these assignments, but I just
Hmm.
kept thinking, I see no point. We're
Hmm.
done.
Right.
Something's going to happen to a world society.
Right.
It's going to be, if we're closed for 5 years, that means starvation. That means worldwide bankruptcies. That means collapse of economies and cultures. And I just didn't know what was going to happen. And then, they found it by late November, just in time. But then I got it. So I dealt with COVID. I had horrible brain fog. I couldn't
Right.
remember days. I couldn't remember uh, assignments I had to do. I wasn't writing at all. I just sort of gave up because I was so fuzzy and out of focus,
Hmm.
had memory holes.
Hmm.
And even after I got better, after my pneumonia went away, um, in February, I the coughing persisted,
Yeah.
and my brain fog persisted all the way into May.
Mhm.
when I got my first vaccine, and then I started getting better. Then the cough started healing. I still have a kind of a sore throat that
Mhm.
is a result of that, but I also had writer's block. All of this is to say that it resulted in writer's block, and I couldn't write, and 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 not being able to write made me depressed and
Right.
made me anxious. And
Mhm.
like all of us, we all went through periods of depression and
Mhm.
anxiety,
Yeah.
clinical depression, and I had to go into therapy, and I'm on medications, and I don't mind saying so, because I think a lot of us are on that. A lot of us
Mhm.
needed a lot of self-care
Mhm.
during this pandemic, when we were living in isolation, in dread, and in the fear that the world, when it returns, is going to be so different that we won't fit in it anymore. So I started feeling irrelevant. I started feeling useless, and I became lethargic and full of inertia. I just wanted to not get up off the couch. It became very, very difficult.
Wow.
Um, and it took a while. It took a while for me to get back on my feet. And I'm working on a project that is like that, even during the pandemic, tried to keep me going. And it's
Mhm.
been very healthy. I did lose one big assignment, and I was sorry that I lost that, because I had my heart set on making that really, really work. It was going to be very big. And I feel like I let a lot of people down by withdrawing from it. I just had to
Mhm.
withdraw because it was,
Mhm.
they needed material, and I was providing nothing for them. I wasn't providing anything of any use. Any of the writing I did just was, it stank. It was awful. So it's, but I also have to look back and see that right at the beginning of 2020, I had done so much.
Right.
I had worked on Coco. I had written Mother Road, which has been performed a lot since it opened in 2019. I'd written a Quijote Nuevo also, that
Mhm.
I oversaw over 4 separate productions. I'd written Retablos. I'd written some essays that I got published. I've done a lot of teaching as well, on Zoom, as well as live. And I just think all of that just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. I was
Right.
exhausted.
Right.
So I have to give myself some credit and just
Mhm.
trust that the inkwell will fill up again. It
Mhm.
will fill up again. So this whole process that I have for my writing was arrested. It was in hiatus for like almost 2 years.
Right.
There was one exception, and that's that I had seen a lot of Zoom plays, a lot of
Mhm.
plays that were done as readings on Zoom,
Mhm.
in this format. And they were plays where really the people are talking to each other in a room,
Mhm.
but because we couldn't get together, this is the only way we could do them.
Mhm.
Uh, and I appreciated that. I supported that, but I found that so inadequate, because it's just, we missed that live experience. And
Right.
also, we're using a form that wasn't designed for these plays. The plays weren't designed for the form of Zoom, of being online. But it's the only way we could share the writing and our good acting, even if it was only this way.
Right.
But I decided to write a Zoom play, and I wrote a play that was written for Zoom, about with 2 characters, um, and they would be side by side. They appear side by
Mhm.
side, and it would be a monologue. First, the man, and then his daughter would take over the monologue, and it was almost like one of them was 45 minutes long, and the other monologue was about 40 minutes long.
Mhm.
So they were really like a full play, but it was written specifically to be performed as a Zoom play, and we did it. We did it. It worked. Um, they can have the play in front of them on the screen here,
Mhm.
so we don't see it. They can see their text, and they can
Right.
scroll and turn the pages without looking away, without looking
Right.
down. They can just look right at the screen and act, fully act. But he's trying to reach out to her through a website, because he finds her. He's been missing his daughter, and she ran away, and he found her. He located her and is trying to get her to come
Was
back.
Was that your latest project?
Yeah, it was called Lonesomes. Uh,
Okay.
one of them, the first play, the first monologue is called Conrado,
Mhm.
and the second one is called Paisley Blue. Um, and um, and so we did it. We performed it, and it went really, really well. We did it live too, so
Wow.
we had to make sure that the streaming never interrupted, never cut loose, and it worked. And then later on, we recorded it. We did it again, recorded it so we could air it and sell tickets for it, so people could stream it or watch it, on
Right.
the computer. It's meant to for that. It's never meant to be performed live. Although some people have said you could still do it and still have the projections of them on the on a screen over their heads or something like that. But they're supposed to be in two completely different spaces.
That's
So
incredible.
that was it. That was the last project that I did in the middle of this pandemic. I wrote it while I was really sick, so I wrote it in a kind of delirium. I don't know how I did it, but I did it, and then submitted Conrado to this Ashland New Play
Mhm.
Festival organization. And Jackie Apodaca, who runs it, said, "This is great. Can we hear from her? Does she like respond?" Because he's essentially talking to her, but she's not in the picture. She's all you
Right.
see is an empty room with a bed, um, and he's trying to reach out and hoping that she's listening. Hoping
Mhm.
for 45 minutes, he's talking to this empty room,
Mhm.
and then he says bye, and he leaves. And when he leaves, she appears and turns off the camera. And then the second part is he's on the site waiting for her to show up, but he falls
Right.
asleep because he's drunk. So he's like this asleep, and she appears finally on camera and talks to him, tries to get him to wake up, but he won't.
Right.
So she just talks to him like that, hoping that maybe he'll wake up and listen, or that it's going into his head in some way. But she needs to vent. She needs to say why she left, why she ran away.
Mhm.
Um, so it's two monologues that make up this play. I've never written a play like that either, so it was really interesting to use the form, to use
Right.
Zoom, this online form, as a way to work. It was really interesting. I really it was a good stretch. I was very
It's a,
happy with it.
I bet. I mean, I never heard of such things. So I bet you to do something and keep the people engaged and feel like a play. It's just a challenge in itself.
Oh yeah, let me tell you,
So
it's really hard.
congratulations.
And to
Yes.
have one person talk all that time
Yes.
without like cutting away. There's no cutaway or a different shot or anything like that. It's just him. She is on a laptop, so she gets to move the laptop and lie down. So you see her up close, lying on the bed, talking into the thing. And sometimes she stands up. She's on her feet, looking down. So the angle, the view of her changes constantly. Uh, so um, it's it's it works really, really well.
So did that lift your writer's block? I guess that helped you just break that.
It did a little bit. I still struggled with my other projects. I couldn't break
Mhm.
through. It was really, really hard, and I have been trying since then to do that. Um, Finally, I am in my new project. It's called it's a play that I wrote for Cal Arts, the
Mhm.
California Institute of the Arts in Valencia, um, and um, and I wrote it for one of the instructors there, who started her own company within this this
Mhm.
institution. The name of it escapes me, but I wrote it for Marisa Chivas and
Mhm.
for her actors in her class in the classes there,
Right.
and for alums as well. So they cast from alums of Cal Arts. And we've been working on this really for almost 3 years. It was supposed to open in 2020, but the pandemic shut us down, and then we took that opportunity to continue working on it. So it's called Scene with Cranes, and it opens in September. So I've been working on it. I'm about to finish the rehearsal draft, And then we started rehearsing in August, live with actors in the room,
Oh, wow. That's
which is
exciting.
really great, really, really great. And I'm working with a director that has taken time to really work with these actors and exploring the characters, not the text, but the characters and their relationship to each other. We did that last October. And then we had another workshop where we worked only with the designers, doing mock-ups of the set and throwing light on it and playing with shadows and how we could work with scrim and what costumes we could throw up there to work with that, and then throwing sound as well, just kind of just playing, making the stage our sandbox so we could play up there. And I had no compunction about getting up there and standing in the space so they could throw light on me, use me as a body in space.
Right.
And they would say, good, now sit down on the sofa and let's see what we can do there. So it was really exciting to be working on that level on the play, with only designers. It was very satisfying. And we did that for about 3 days. Then we came home. We did that, when was it? I think March, sometime in March.
Yeah, I can
wasn't that long
hear
ago.
the excitement of that's your thing.
I am,
because
but
that's your thing.
I
You
know,
can just hear it.
I know, but in some respect, I want to be done. I want to be done with my theater work because I have this urge to write more prose, to write more stories. I have this desire to tell more stories about my hometown and the people that come from there. I have a novel that I want to write that I just have little bits of notes, and I've done some research. But I have these notes to write a novel about a character that I've written some short stories of. His name is Mundo, or in his later life, he's known as Ray. But as a kid growing up, he's named Mundo, and he's kind of my alter ego. But he has all kinds of adventures. I've written 3 short stories about him that have been published, and in various journals. But I want to write a novel about Mundo and a new friend he makes in El Paso that he goes on some adventures with, who later turns out to be Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, serial killer,
wow.
who's from my hometown, who grew up in El Paso.
Is he really?
There. Yes.
Oh my God.
So I want to write about him and these adventures that happened before he moved to LA and to San Francisco to do those killings. So it's about, I just want to write a novel about Richard Ramirez, which is really dark material, but I have.
Yeah, that's where you go in at this point, and that's great that you follow in that instinct, just like you do in your writing. So, I mean, I can tell, and I'm of course I'm loving it because we don't get plays out here in the South, but not from you. But I think it's great that we getting to know a little bit about your process and everything. And of all the work that you have written, what is your favorite play that you have written? What is the one that is really close to your heart, or is it Retablos? What is in your work that you can say that's my favorite?
Well, judging from the last work I showed up at, the last rehearsal process just last week in Dallas, Texas, at University of Texas at Arlington, they did a production of Lydia. And I've attended a fair amount of, I've been part of the rehearsal process for a number of professional productions, but it's interesting how working with young people in the roles in that play, I'm writing about them. They are the age of the characters, more or less the age of the characters. They're closer to that age of the characters than the professional actors that have interpreted those roles, who are, some in their 30s. And they're playing 17, 16-year-olds, 18, 19, up to 20. And I find that when you have young people that are, that age playing those roles, it just means so much more. They connect to it, to the text so much more immediately. because I'm writing about characters that were part of my youth
Mm-hmm.
and moments in time that were part of my upbringing in El Paso. And so it's so raw for them. And I'm surprised at how raw the writing is,
Mm-hmm.
and open. And I feel like it's the first play that I feel like I really, really let my guard down and let my heart speak. And so to me, Lydia is still a work that means that just means so much more to me than other works, even though they're all my children. I
Right. Right.
There's another play that I thought was my masterpiece that was called Santos and Santos that I wrote back
Mm-hmm.
in 1993, and that's had its share number of productions, but hasn't been done in a long time. And they did a reading of it online recently uh, using Zoom, and I attended it, and I can't believe how angry that work is, how deeply enraged I was when I wrote that play, and how I let everyone have it, and how it was built up around resentments around
Mm-hmm.
around what it meant to be Latino in this country. And in the 90s, we were all kind of like really realizing, there's a leash on me. How did
Right.
that get there? And why did I let it stay there for so long? And so
Right. I mean,
there's this rage that comes out from that, from tearing it off. And it hits everyone. You just so you have to get out of the way. So it's a deeply angry play, deeply satiric and funny, very funny. I thought more than I intended it to be. It's so funny, but it's nasty satire, really satire, that also works on a tragedy level, on a
right.
tragic level.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying a lot about where I was as a
Mm-hmm.
Latino in America at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Lydia says something about who I was as a Latino in my maturity in
Mm-hmm.
28, in 2008, how different I was then. And I'm in a different place now, um, uh, because of Retablos. Retablos kind of opened me up to
Yeah.
like really accepting who I am. And despite all the things I feel were so unfair
Mm-hmm.
about American culture and its
Mm-hmm.
effect on me, and about my Mexican culture and its effect on me, I feel like, accept it. This is who I am. These are the influences I had in my life. And for good or for ill, they're part of me now. It's part of the fabric of who I am. And that
Mm-hmm.
acceptance means that I then have a freedom and a fearlessness about dealing with myself and with the world
Mm-hmm.
we live in, more frankly and more fearlessly.
That's amazing that I think that unfortunately that comes later in life, like you said, when we mature and we realize, okay, this is who I am, rather than, especially when you're second generation or you have a, a white parent, then you are like, one of them is Latino, one of us white. It's like you just don't know where you belong. And
Yeah.
I think those words are very comforting to hear, um, for those, and kids or teens that are dealing like, ni de aquí ni de allá,
Yeah.
even though
Yeah.
they're acá, it's just one of those things. So it's
Yeah, and
amazing.
I think I was attracted to stories about the border, and I keep going back to El Paso, because I think that river really defined me. I
Mhm,
think it defined me. I have accepted that I was that my consciousness is in the hyphen between
mhm,
Mexican and American,
mhm,
and I dwell in that hyphen, and I like the ambiguity of that.
mhm.
I like the mystery of that. I like because it creates tensions and it creates drama and story. Um, so I feel like every time I go back to El Paso, there's another story, another
That's great.
rich story there to mine.
Inspiration. Amazing. And we could definitely read another in Retablos. I want you to know that 100%. Um, I know that you would like to read something for us, and I can't wait to hear
Sure,
what would you like to share with us today.
sure. I'd like to read from Retablos and maybe something from Texas, if there's time. One of the I'll pick one of the briefer ones, so I don't go on and on and on. But I'd like to read Consuelo.
Yes.
Okay. Her name is Consuelo, and she is our maid, our criada. She has something in her hands, a precious object. She comes down from the mountains of Mexico and takes a long bus ride to Ciudad Juarez, then walking over the Santa Fe Bridge to El Paso, boards another bus that takes her along the curve of the lower valley to our house. She lives with us, this lady whom everyone thinks is our abuela. Because like our abuela, she commands our respect and rouses our love. Setting up her meager belongings in a small room near the kitchen, her comb, her picture of San Martin giving a piece of his cloak to a mendicant, her rosary, and her small crumbling Bible beside the single bed that used to be my little brother's, she puts on her simple country dress and her apron with homemade rick-rack. She's small and stout, with strong, bowed legs that carry her through the house she spends all day cleaning. Her face dark and furrowed, her hair silver and tightly braided into a plait that hangs down her back like a staff. Her hands rough and calloused as a man's. She cooks all our meals and calls for us when the plates are served. Wherever we are, we hear her summons and head for home. The food is so good that Kino and Marcos and the other kids want to play too. She feeds us, feeds the dog, feeds the canaries in their cage, then feeds herself. All we know is her name, which is consolation, which is perfect, since that is what she brings to my parents, who bust their asses day and night to make ends meet, which they never do. These ends that barely even pass each other across the room. She grows hierbas in the backyard and makes healing soups and teas for us when we're sick. Sometimes, when she's alone, when a lull in her daily labors permits, she sits and watches the Canal 2 on TV, the Spanish language shows. At night, after we've all had our dinners and are getting ready for bed, she goes to her room with the door closed, sits on her bed with her open Bible, and prays. There are times when she goes to see her family. She says she'll be gone 2 weeks, but 2 weeks can turn into 4 and then into 8 because of difficulties at home or crossing over issues. But 6 years of Consuelo, 6 years of her quiet folk singing as she hangs our clothes on the line, her sweeping the porch with that old broom, her stern admonishments to us for disrespecting our parents, 6 years of her practically raising us, invokes the deep mestizaje that lives in our blood, that reminds us we come from something older, simpler, and richer than the privileges we think are owed to us in this land. This is a retablo of Consuelo, sitting on her bed with a door ajar just enough for a 9-year-old to peer through. This old woman with her hair unbraided, loose all the way down to her lap, with a sacred object in the cradle of her hands. What can it be but the apple we threw away, which she retrieved, saying, "Waste nothing of God's," and took to her room. And here it is, this sunken, moldy apple, and Consuelo gingerly taking bites of it in the luminous mystery of faith. So that's
like they do this. I don't want to
that's
clap
Consuelo.
and deafen everybody like they do in my kids'
Yeah,
school. That's
for
unbelievable.
Consuelo. That's for Consuelo.
Consuelo. That's amazing.
Yeah. One time she did go away to see her family, and we never heard from her again. She just
Never came back, right?
Never came back. But we thought she was like our grandmother.
Mhm.
And she raised us. Both my parents had to work. My
Mhm.
dad was gone at night, usually had the night shift, from he'd be gone from like 6 to he'd come in at 2 or 3. And then my mom worked during the day. She'd go in at 8 o'clock and wouldn't get home till like 5 or 6. So, when we were little, we needed someone like that.
Mhm.
And thank God it was Consuelo and
Yeah.
not anyone else. She was very special. And we loved her. We all loved her and respected her. Although we disrespected her too. We were kids. What are you gonna do? No le hacemos caso. So she'd come with a chancla.
Good for her.
Good for her, indeed.
Yes.
I want to read another one if there's
Sure.
time. And the type is even smaller in this little book, but I hope I can get through it without like stumbling. It's called Hamburger Inn, 1969. We sit in front of the old boxy black and white RCA, watching the comedy shows. My sister, my little brothers, and me. It's The Flying Nun, followed by Bewitched, and then That Girl. My mom is in the kitchen trying to scare up some dinner for us. We hear her behind us banging pots and pans. My fingernails go to my mouth, which means I'm hungry. Mom says she's tired. She's been working all day at the neighborhood soda fountain. When the commercials come on, Mom says, "Why don't we go see your dad at work?" She calls ahead to tell him we're on our way, and we pile into the Ford Galaxy. It's a shimmering Thursday night on Alameda Avenue. Cars are full with families and kids, and they're playing music so loudly we can't hear our own radio. In the distance, I see a blurry Spanish language movie playing on the screen of the Escarate drive-in. We head past the cemetery to the older stretch of Alameda, where the crumbling auto shops and grocery stores are shuttered for the night, and the barred windows of the little adobe houses lining the street glow with warm lamplight. We turn left onto a side road, then down a dark alley. It opens to a gravel parking lot at the back entrance of the Hamburger Inn. Just a screen door and floodlights. But we know there's more than that. My mom refuses to set foot inside. She sends me in to ask for my dad. As the oldest, it's a right I've earned. The pride of it tingles my scalp. I open the screen door and immediately smell hot grease and burnt onions. There is so much bustle and noise. Cooks slapping patties on the grill, the scrawny kid washing tall stacks of dishes, waitresses jostling past the customers at the counter, the jarring barring of the cash register, or the jarring bring of the cash register. People chatter away at their tables while they eat, and the jukebox is playing a Mexican ranchera by a silky-voiced tenor. I think it's my dad by the steaming pot of menudo, and I call for him, but the man in the stained white shirt and paper hat is only Poncho. His paunchy face beams when he turns to see me. He makes some jokes about my cowlick, causing a couple of stern-looking old men to chuckle. With his large hand, he leads me back outside and says that my dad is getting the order ready. He waves grandiosely at my mom, who can't help but burst out laughing. Then Poncho goes back inside. He'll die of liver cancer about 20 years later, a pained old drunk still making us laugh. I feel my stomach grumbling as I take my seat in the back. We sit in silence, united in our hunger. At last, the screen door opens and my dad steps out. He is under the floodlights in his white apron and pleated gray pants. With his steady walk and his head held high, he holds the white paper bags of burgers and fries and ice-cubed Coca-Colas. He'll never surpass this moment. He passes the bags around and we dig in while he and mom trade stories of the day. We're too busy to care about their conversation, but there is one story I catch. It was quiet earlier, he tells my mom. Not many people. This old borracho with a bag of pan dulce comes in, wanting something. Couldn't understand him, he was so drunk. He got loud when Licha from the morning shift asked him to leave, banging on the counter. I went to him and told him, que se vaya ya, He tried to swing at me, but I moved and grabbed him by the collar. I pulled him outside and threw him on the sidewalk and told him to go home. When I went back inside, I looked through the window and there he was on his knees, trying to pick up the pan dulce on the sidewalk. Seeing him like that, on his knees like that, I couldn't take it. So I went and picked up his bread for him and put it in the bag. And then I walked him to the bakery and bought him some more. How's your hamburguesa? Poncho yells through the screen door that the rush has started. He better get his nagas back to work. My father gives us each a tussle of the head. He walks toward the door and turns back. The floodlights wash over him in his white apron and shirt, and the figure passes into a time that has no time at all. So that's another one for my father.
That's amazing.
That's how I want to remember him. That's how I will always remember him.
Mhm.
Taking care of us, working at the Hamburger Inn, and him being just in his community, beloved in his community there by everybody, and him also having a sense of, like, feeling for how he treated that poor old drunk, and how he felt, I have to fix this. I have to make this better. I have to take care of him. So that's sort of one of the strongest memories that occurred to me after I, got the book in.
We have to book in, but there's times for another Tableau too, or something. There's a plenty of opportunity.
I wonder. I hope so.
I know that I will certainly read it. I cannot tell you. I know I told you this 300 times, but you talking to us at Hispanic Notes, we're very honored that you say yes to us. It means a lot to us to have someone like you with your talent and your history and all your plays and your amazing book. It really does. I'm a little starstruck, but I think I managed to keep my composure.
Don't be starstruck, please. I'm like anybody else, and I struggle like anybody else in my writing. It's just and then we finally find our way in, and we find our voice, and we just go there. But I'm nothing without the people that I have experienced in my life, because they are the ones that give me the stories. They're the ones that are the harbingers of the truths that I need to hear. They deliver them to me in my sleep, in my unconscious memories, in the quiet moments when I'm still. They land on me, and I feel this impulse to finally give them voice. So I have to remain humble in their presence, as a writer.
And your sensitivity comes through, and your vulnerability, and your real people issues, I think. And family, just like us. I think we all do. So I think we can identify ourselves with you. I certainly do. But again, I look forward to continue following your trajectory, and I just can't wait to see one of your plays one day if I'm able to do so.
I hope you can.
I absolutely will make it happen now.
Where are you, by the way?
I am in Louisiana. It's a long story.
Ooh. Yeah. Are you in New Orleans?
Close to New Orleans.
Close to New Orleans? Oh,
very close to New Orleans.
We got to finally go visit New Orleans a few years ago. We did a road trip from Nashville all the way down there and back, going the other way around so we could stop in Tupelo and see Elvis's birthplace, go to Florence, Alabama to see the music studios, the famous music studios there, but especially to go to New Orleans.
Yes, and great place.
Enjoy the immensely rich, deep history, and the cuisine there, and the music. Oh my Lord! I went to an amazing Mexican restaurant there that is just incredible. It was decorated in these beautiful lights, had wonderful paintings and great music, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was there.
I may think about something when we start recording. But anyway, so yes, we will share the links to your website and links to your work and your and retablos, like I mentioned to you before, where all of our audience and anyone that can be interested in purchasing your books. I cannot tell you that you should, because I've read it 3 times.
Thank you.
So I thank you once again for your time. I know it's valuable, and I appreciate you acceder. I can't even speak anymore. For this interview, and
Right.
we wish you the best. I hope you can
Thank you.
continue moving forward and enjoy your life in your wonderful house. I saw some of the pictures in your interviews, and it looks amazing.
I will pardon the phone. Finally, it rang at the end of this whole thing. I forgot to disconnect it.
I didn't hear it.
But I wanted to say that I will also send you photographs of those retablos if you want to post them on the site.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll send you those right now.
Absolutely.
And along with information on both these books I read from.
In Texas, yes, please do.
Yes.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Octavio. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and hope we talk to you soon.
Marcela, it was my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.